The rain hit the granite like a judge's gavel, slow, deliberate, final. Cosimo Pellegrini knelt in a $4,000 suit that didn't fit anymore, prison muscles straining the seams, his tattooed knuckles white against a bouquet of white roses. The headstone was new, polished black granite, 3 portrait photos embedded in silver frames: Luca, Matteo, Gia, ages 6, 5, and 4. The only family he had left in the world, or so the coroner's report claimed. Accidental poisoning. Tragic. The mother, his ex-fiancée, was devastated. A thorn punctured his palm. He didn't flinch. Physical pain was a language he spoke fluently now. "Sir." The voice was small, sharp, a shard of glass in the quiet. Cosimo turned. A girl stood 3 feet away, maybe 8 years old, overalls caked in industrial grime, hair matted like she'd been sleeping under bridges. She shouldn't be here. The cemetery had a $200 entry fee just to keep people like her out. "Sir," she repeated, stepping closer, her breath visible in the cold air. "Your fiancé didn't bury them under the stone." His hand crushed the roses. Thorns drove deeper. "She buried them alive. Here." The girl's finger extended, trembling, but it didn't point at the grave. It pointed past his shoulder, toward the tree line, where a woman in a yellow dress stood watching, perfectly still, a champagne flute catching the light. Vittoria. The rain stopped, or maybe Cosimo just stopped hearing it. "The big house on the cliffs," the girl whispered, leaning in like she was afraid the dead might hear. "I saw them through the gates. They have windows but no doors. They have air. But they think you're the ghost." Something inside Cosimo, something that had been buried deeper than any coffin, tore open. He stood. The roses fell. 38 petals landed on the grave like blood on snow. "What's your name?" His voice came out wrong. Not the voice of a man. The voice of something older, darker. "Serafina, sir. Serafina." He turned the name over like a bullet in his palm. "How do you know this?" "Because I live where people don't look, sir." Her eyes, too old for her face, met his. "And I saw what she did before she paid the doctors to say they died." In the distance, Vittoria raised her glass. A toast, a taunt. Cosimo Pellegrini had spent 5 years in a cell learning patience, learning control, learning how to be something other than the monster they'd made him into. All of that died in the next 3 seconds. Show me," he said. And the girl who lived in the shadows took the hand of the man who used to own them. The last time Cosimo saw Dario Valente, the man was bleeding from a shiv wound in a prison shower, 3 gang members standing over him with the kind of smiles that meant they weren't finished. Cosimo hadn't asked questions. He'd simply broken 2 arms and a jaw, dragged Dario to the medical wing, and walked away before the guards arrived. Dario never forgot. Men like him kept ledgers in their heads, and debts were the only currency that mattered behind bars. Finding him took 4 hours and 3 burner phones. The address Serafina provided, whispered in the back of Cosimo's rental car as they drove away from the cemetery, led to a condemned textile factory in the industrial quarter, the kind of place the city pretended didn't exist. Rust bled down the brick walls like old wounds. The windows were boarded, but Cosimo could see the faint blue glow of monitors seeping through the cracks. He knocked 3 times. Pause. Twice more, the pattern Dario had used in prison to signal safe contact. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then the sound of metal scraping metal, 6 locks disengaging in sequence. The door opened 2 inches. A camera lens poked through the gap, not an eye. "Pellegrini!" Dario's voice crackled through a speaker mounted above the frame. "You're either here to collect that favor, or you're here to kill me. If it's the second one, I've got 12 automated protocols that'll send every file I've ever touched to every 3-letter agency in existence." "It's the first one," Cosimo said, "and I need it now." Another pause, then the door swung open. Dario looked worse than he had in prison. Thinner, paler. His hair had gone completely white, despite being only 36. He wore a black hoodie and fingerless gloves, even though the basement was sweltering. The paranoia hadn't been prison-induced. It was genetic. Downstairs. Dario muttered, already turning. And don't touch anything. The basement was a cathedral of technology. Servers hummed along every wall, their lights blinking in rhythms that felt almost alive. Cable bundles thick as a man's wrist snaked across the ceiling. 6 monitors formed a semicircle around a single chair, each screen showing a different camera feed. Traffic intersections, ATM lobbies, warehouse loading docks. Dario didn't just watch the world, he dissected it. "You're looking for someone," Dario said, dropping into the chair without looking at Cosimo, and his fingers were already moving across 3 keyboards simultaneously. "You wouldn't burn the favor for anything less." 3 someones. Cosimo pulled out his phone, showed him the photos from the gravestone. "My children, declared dead 5 years ago. I have reason to believe they're being held at an estate on the northern cliffs. I need proof before I move." Dario's hand stopped. He turned, studying Cosimo's face with the same intensity he gave his screens. "You're not talking about a custody dispute. I'm talking about a woman who faked their deaths and buried them where I'd never look." "Coordinates?" Cosimo recited them. Dario's fingers blurred. Lines of code scrolled across the center monitor. Satellite imagery bloomed on the left screen. A sprawling compound perched on granite cliffs, the ocean black and churning below. The main house was modernist glass and steel, solar panels glinting like scales. Security walls, guard towers, a private helipad. "Allegri estate," Dario muttered. "Tech billionaire, government contracts. The security system on this place costs more than a small country's defense budget. Can you get inside it? Not without triggering every alarm from here to Quantico." Dario zoomed in, highlighting infrared sensors along the perimeter. "But I don't need to get inside their network to see what's happening outside it." He pulled up another window. Flight logs, commercial drone permits, delivery schedules. "There's a grey market surveillance company that sells footage to insurance adjusters," Dario explained, typing faster now. "They fly drones over high-value properties, document everything for liability purposes, completely legal." Completely ignored. 3 minutes later, video began playing on the right monitor. The timestamp read 6 days ago. The footage was shaky, shot from 200 feet up, but the resolution was sharp enough to see details. The estate's western courtyard, a fountain shaped like a swan, and 3 children playing near a garden wall. Cosimo stopped breathing. The boy on the left, dark hair, serious expression, the way he held himself too carefully. That was Luca. The middle child chasing a ball with wild, uncoordinated joy, Matteo. The smallest one, sitting in the grass arranging stones into patterns, Gia, alive, not in a grave, not poisoned, not gone, alive. His hand found the edge of Dario's desk, gripping hard enough that his knuckles went bone white. "Keep watching," Dario said quietly. A woman entered the frame. Yellow sundress, dark hair pulled back. Vittoria. She knelt beside Gia, said something that made the girl laugh, then scooped her up and carried her toward the house. The 2 boys followed. They disappeared inside. The video ended. "That's not a prison," Cosimo said, voice hollow. "That's a family." "That's a lie," Dario corrected, "and lies need infrastructure." He pulled up financial records, shell companies, medical files stamped with government seals. She didn't just fake their deaths. She rewrote reality. New birth certificates listing her new husband as the father. Adoption papers backdated 3 years. She erased you from their lives so completely that even if you showed up tomorrow, legally, you'd be nobody. Cosimo stared at the frozen image on the screen. his daughter's face, smiling. "Can you get me inside?" he asked. Dario leaned back, lacing his fingers behind his head. "Getting you inside is easy. Getting you back out with 3 kids and no bloodshed, that's the expensive part. Name your price." "I don't want money, Pellegrini." Dario's eyes were flat, calculating. "I want the same thing you want. I want to watch someone who thinks they're untouchable learn they're not." Cosimo extended his hand. Dario took it. "Then let's kill a ghost," Cosimo said. Vittoria Allegri lived in the kind of apartment that existed above the clouds, literally. 42nd floor, penthouse suite overlooking the harbour, the kind of address that required 3 security checkpoints just to reach the elevator. Cosimo walked through all of them with a visitor's pass arranged by Dario, a fake appointment with her interior designer, complete, with fabricated references and a burner credit card that would self-destruct in 6 hours. The door opened before he could knock. She stood in the threshold wearing the yellow dress from the cemetery, champagne still in her hand, as if she'd been expecting him. Up close, she looked different than she had 5 years ago. Harder. The softness around her eyes had calcified into something sharp and deliberate. Her smile was a curator's smile, the kind reserved for art she owned, but didn't particularly love. "Cosimo," she said, his name like a wine she was evaluating. I wondered how long it would take. He didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, letting her see what 5 years in a cage had done to him. She stepped aside, gestured to the interior. White furniture, abstract paintings worth more than most people's houses, floor-to-ceiling windows framing the city like a conquest. "Come in. We should talk like adults." The apartment smelled like vanilla and new money. He followed her to the living room, watched as she settled onto a leather couch that probably cost what his old crew used to make in a month. She didn't offer him a seat. "You went to the cemetery," she said, sipping her champagne. "That was touching. Morbid, but touching. You were there." "I go every week." Her smile widened. "It's important for the children to see grief modeled properly. They need to understand that loss is permanent." The words landed like a blade between ribs. "They're alive," Cosimo said. "Are they?" Vittoria tilted her head, studying him. "Define alive, Cosimo. Breathing? Yes. But the children who knew you as their father? Those children are quite dead." "I made sure of it." She rose, walked to a bookshelf, pulled down a photo album, opened it on the coffee table between them. Page after page of family photos. The children at birthday parties, at beaches, at holiday dinners. All recent. All featuring Vittoria and her husband. All without Cosimo. "Do you know what the hardest part was?" she asked conversationally. "Not the legal paperwork, not the bribes, not even faking the poisoning. It was teaching them to stop asking about you." Cosimo's jaw tightened. "Luca was the worst," she continued, turning pages. "He'd cry at night. 'Where's Papa? When is Papa coming home?' For months, Cosimo, months of that voice breaking my sleep." She looked up, eyes flat. "So I hired specialists, child psychologists who understand memory reconstruction. Do you know what happens when you consistently tell a 5-year-old that someone never existed? When you remove every photo, every toy, every mention of a name?" She closed the album. The brain adapts. It fills the gaps. Luca stopped crying after 8 months. Matteo took 6. Gia was easiest. She was so young, she barely remembered you to begin with. The memory hit Cosimo without warning. 5 years ago, the last morning before the arrest. Gia climbing into his lap at breakfast, sticky hands wrapping around his neck, whispering, "Papa Bear," because he'd growled while tickling her. The way she'd laughed, pure and uncontainable, like joy was the only language she knew. Now that little girl arranged stones in a garden and called another man her father. "Why?" The word came out rough. Vittoria set down her glass, stood, and walked to the window. The city sprawled beneath her like a chessboard. Because you were going to prison either way, Cosimo. The evidence I provided made sure of that. But I had a choice. Let 3 children grow up knowing their father was a criminal, or let them grow up believing they came from something better. You framed me. I liberated myself. She turned, backlit by the setting sun. You built your empire on blood and fear. I built mine on strategy and patience. Your children, my children now, will grow up believing their mother saved them from poverty, not that she orchestrated their father's destruction. They'll find out. Will they? Vittoria's laugh was crystalline, rehearsed. Who will tell them? You? The stranger with the prison tattoos and the violent history. I have legal custody, adoption papers, more medical records showing you were an unfit parent even before your incarceration. If you go near them, I'll have you arrested for harassment. If you try to contact them, I'll get a restraining order. If you breathe in their direction, I will bury you so deep that not even your hacker friend will find the hole. She walked closer, until she was 3 feet away, close enough that he could see the faint lines around her mouth, where her smile had been practiced too many times. You lost, Cosimo, not in court, not in prison. You lost the moment I decided you were inconvenient. He stood there, hands at his sides, every instinct screaming to react. 5 years ago he would have. 5 years ago this conversation would have ended with broken furniture and sirens. But 5 years changes a man. You're right, he said quietly. Vittoria blinked. She hadn't expected agreement. I did lose, Cosimo continued. I lost time. I lost my freedom. I lost my empire. He stepped closer. But you made one mistake. What's that? You taught them I was dead. You didn't teach them I was a ghost. He turned, walked to the door. This conversation is over, Cosimo. Vittoria called after him. He paused at the threshold, looked back. No, he said, it's just starting. The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin ceiling. In the hallway, he pulled out his phone, texted Dario 3 words. She confirmed everything. The reply came instantly. Good. Ghosts don't need permission to haunt. The estate looked different through a telephoto lens at 3 in the morning. Less like a home, or more like a research facility that had forgotten it was supposed to house human beings. Cosimo and Dario sat in a rental van half a mile down the coastal road, parked behind a copse of wind-swept pines, surrounded by enough surveillance equipment to stock a government black site. Security rotation changes every 4 hours, Dario muttered, zooming in on the south gate. 12 guards minimum. Ex-military, probably private contractors. They're too disciplined to be regular rent-a-cops. Cosimo watched the screens in silence. Thermal imaging showed heat signatures moving through the house in predictable patterns. Kitchen staff, cleaning crew, guards walking perimeter routes that never varied by more than 30 seconds. It was choreographed. Clinical. The children's wing is here, Dario said, highlighting the eastern section of the compound. 3rd floor, reinforced glass, biometric locks on every door. The windows don't open. They're sealed units with built-in air filtration. Why would you need air filtration on a cliff overlooking the ocean? Dario's expression darkened. You wouldn't, unless you wanted complete environmental control. He pulled up another window on his laptop. Medical supply invoices, pharmaceutical orders. All routed through shell companies, but Dario had cracked the encryption 2 hours ago. Look at this. He pointed to a recurring order. Pediatric sedatives. Anti-anxiety medications. Doses consistent with long-term administration for children ages 4 to 7. Delivered monthly for the past 4 years. Cosimo's hands curled into fists. They didn't poison them, Dario continued. They sedated them, heavily, probably for weeks leading up to the staged deaths. He opened another file. Hospital records, falsified but detailed enough to pass legal scrutiny. 3 children admitted to emergency care with symptoms of acute toxin ingestion, vitals crashing, resuscitation attempts. Time of death recorded by Dr. Raphael Caney, a cardiologist whose license had been temporarily suspended 3 years prior for accepting pharmaceutical kickbacks. Caney was bought, Dario said. He signed the death certificates, collected $2 million through an offshore account, then retired to the Maldives. He's still there. The children were sedated during the poisoning, Cosimo said slowly, piecing it together. Made to look like they were dying. Not just sedated, chemically flatlined. Beta blockers to slow the heart rate, neuromuscular agents to suppress breathing. Any ER doctor seeing those vitals would assume cardiac arrest. Dario pulled up toxicology reports. But if you know what you're looking for, and Caney did, you'd recognize induced hypotension, controlled, reversible. They faked the deaths in a hospital. In front of witnesses, nurses, other doctors, all convinced they were watching 3 children die from accidental poisoning. Dario's voice was flat, clinical, but his jaw was tight. Then Vittoria arranged private cremation, except there were no bodies to cremate. The children were transferred to a private medical facility for observation while the death certificates were filed. Cosimo stared at the thermal images of the estate. 3 small heat signatures in the children's wing, barely moving. Asleep, probably. Safe in beds that cost more than most people earned in a year, in a fortress designed to keep the world out and them in. She didn't just erase me from their lives, he said. She convinced the entire world they were gone. Legally they are. Dario zoomed in on a different section of the compound. These are the medical logs from the estate's internal server. Daily health monitoring, weight, height, cognitive assessments. She's documenting everything like they're part of a longitudinal study. He opened one of the files. A psychological evaluation for Luca, dated 3 months ago. The language was cold, detached. Subject continues to show improvement in attachment formation with primary caregivers. No spontaneous mentions of prior life events. Memory consolidation appears successful. Cosimo read the words twice. On subject. Not son. Not child. Subject. They're being conditioned. He said. Not conditioned. Rewritten. Dario pulled up video footage from inside the house. Camera feeds he'd managed to access through the estate's smart home system. The playroom. Bright colors. Educational toys. A wall covered in family photos. All featuring Vittoria, her husband, and the 3 children. Every surface in that house tells them a story, and you're not in it. The next clip showed Gia sitting at a small table, coloring. A woman in a white coat, therapist probably, sat across from her, speaking gently. The audio was muted, but the scene was clear enough. This wasn't a home. It was a reconstruction project. How do we breach it? Cosimo asked. Dario leaned back, rubbed his eyes. The security system is layered. Outer perimeter, inner perimeter, are biometric access points, and a panic room with independent power and satellite uplink. If we trip one alarm, the whole place locks down. Steel shutters drop over every window. Doors seal magnetically. The children's wing becomes a vault. There has to be a vulnerability. There is. Dario pointed to the calendar on his screen. 3 days from now, Vittoria's hosting a charity gala. 200 guests, catering staff, valet drivers. The security focus shifts from internal threats to external management. It's the only window where the house is permeable. Cosimo stared at the estate, the glass walls glowing faintly in the pre-dawn darkness. A fortress of lies, a prison disguised as paradise. Then we have 3 days, he said. Dario closed the laptop. 3 days to plan a heist where the only thing worth stealing is the truth. The breach took 47 minutes. Dario's fingers moved across the keyboard like a pianist performing surgery, each keystroke deliberate, surgical. Cosimo sat behind him in the van, watching lines of code scroll across 3 monitors, understanding none of it but feeling every second stretch like a tendon about to snap. "Almost there," Dario muttered. "The nursery cameras run on a separate subnet. Whoever designed this security system didn't want the kids' footage mixing with the main surveillance feeds. Probably privacy concerns." "Can you access it?" "Already am." Dario hit a final key. The rightmost monitor flickered, went black, then bloomed into color. A bedroom, pale blue walls, stuffed animals arranged on a shelf, on a small bed shaped like a race car. And in that bed, tangled in sheets printed with cartoon rockets, was a boy. Luca. Cosimo stopped breathing. The camera angle was high, mounted in a corner, looking down like a guardian angel with electronic eyes. The image quality was sharp enough to see details. The way Luca's hair fell across his forehead, the slow rise and fall of his chest, the small hand curled against his cheek. He was bigger, taller. The roundness of early childhood had sharpened into something leaner. But the face was unmistakable, the same serious expression, even in sleep, like he was dreaming of problems that needed solving. "Next room," Dario said quietly, switching feeds. Another bedroom, green walls this time. Sports equipment in the corner, a baseball glove, a soccer ball. The bed was a mess of pillows and blankets, and buried somewhere in the middle was Matteo. Cosimo could only see part of his face, but it was enough. The same wild, uncontainable energy, even unconscious. One leg hanging off the edge of the bed, one arm thrown over his head. He'd always slept like he was running in his dreams. "And the last one," Dario whispered. The third room was different, softer. Pink curtains, a dollhouse in the corner, and in the bed, surrounded by stuffed rabbits and bears, was Gia. She was so small, still so impossibly small. Cosimo's hand found the edge of the console, gripped it hard enough that the metal creaked. His daughter. 4 years old when he'd last held her. 9 now. Half her life lived without him. She stirred, rolled over, clutched a stuffed elephant to her chest. The same elephant he'd given her for her 3rd birthday. Blue with embroidered stars. She'd named it Cosmo because she couldn't pronounce Cosimo yet. She'd kept it. Something in his chest cracked open. "Audio?" he asked, voice hoarse. Dario shook his head. "Video only. The mics are disabled remotely, probably to prevent anyone from doing exactly what we're doing." Cosimo watched Gia sleep, watched the gentle rhythm of her breathing, watched her small fingers tighten around the elephant's ear. She was right there, 15 miles away. Less than an hour's drive. She was breathing the same air, living under the same moon, existing in the same moment in time. And he couldn't reach her. The screens showed all 3 children now, side by side, 3 windows into 3 separate worlds. Luca shifted in his sleep, frowning like something in his dream troubled him. Matteo kicked the blankets off entirely. Gia murmured something inaudible, her lips moving against the elephant's head. "They're okay," Dario said. "Physically they're healthy, fed, rested. Whatever else Vittoria is, she's keeping them safe." Safe. The word felt like a lie. They were alive, yes. Breathing? Yes, but safe? In a fortress designed to convince them their father was dead? In a life built on sedation and psychological reconstruction? "Can you record this?" Cosimo asked. "Already am. I need to see them during the day, when they're awake." Dario pulled up a schedule. "The cameras activate on motion sensors. I can set alerts for when they enter their rooms. But Cosimo, you need to understand. Watching them won't make this easier. I don't need easier." Cosimo's eyes stayed locked on the screens. I need proof they're still mine. Dario was quiet for a moment. Then he pulled up another file. Older footage, archived from 2 years ago. He pressed play without warning. The same bedroom. Gia, younger, maybe 7. She sat on the floor with crayons and paper, drawing something. A woman's voice from off-camera, Vittoria, asked her what she was making. Gia held up the drawing. 4 stick figures. A woman. A man. 2 boys. 1 girl. My family, Gia said, smiling. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Who's who? Gia pointed. That's you. That's Papa. That's Luca and Matteo. That's me. And what about your first Papa? Vittoria's voice was gentle, therapeutic. Do you remember him? Gia's smile faltered. She looked at the drawing, confused. I don't have a first Papa. That's right, darling. You've only ever had one. The video ended. Now Cosimo sat in the dark van, staring at the blank screen where his daughter's face had been. She didn't remember. Or she'd been taught not to. The distinction didn't matter. The result was the same. I can pull more archived footage, Dario offered. Track the progression. See when the memories started fragmenting. No. Cosimo's voice was flat. I've seen enough. He stood, needing to move, needing air, needing anything other than the suffocating certainty that his children were alive and lost at the same time. He pushed open the van door, stepped into the pre-dawn cold. The ocean was a black void beyond the cliffs. The estate glowed in the distance like a ship on dark water. Dario appeared beside him, laptop under his arm. 3 days until the gala. 3 days, Cosimo repeated. Can you hold it together that long? Cosimo looked at him. I held it together for 5 years in a cell. I can hold it together for 3 more days. But his hands were shaking when he said it. If you are still listening, I'd appreciate if you like and subscribe right now. Your support means a whole lot to me, more than you might know. Thank you, stranger. I love you. The file was buried 17 layers deep in a server farm outside Prague, hidden behind encryption that would have taken a government agency months to crack. Dario found it in 6 hours. He didn't say anything when the download finished. Just turned the laptop toward Cosimo and pressed play. The video showed a living room Cosimo recognized immediately. His old apartment, the one he'd shared with Vittoria before everything collapsed. The timestamp read 6 years ago, 2 months before his arrest. On screen, Cosimo watched himself, or something wearing his face, grab Vittoria by the arm. Watched his own mouth form words he'd never spoken. Watched his hand rise, watched her flinch, watched the scene play out like a nightmare directed by someone who understood violence, but had never actually felt it. That's not me, Cosimo said. I know. Dario's voice was clinical, detached. But the prosecution didn't. He opened another window. Source files. Raw footage of Cosimo from security cameras, social media, old interviews. Hundreds of hours of material, catalogued and time-stamped. A digital skeleton waiting to be reanimated. She hired a studio, Dario explained. High-end outfit that usually works on film productions. They specialize in de-aging actors, posthumous performances, that kind of work. Completely legal when used for entertainment, less legal when used to fabricate evidence of domestic assault. He pulled up invoices, payment records showing Vittoria's shell company transferring funds to a visual effects firm called Parallax Digital. The dates aligned perfectly. 3 months before Cosimo's arrest, she'd commissioned what the invoice called Archival Reconstruction Services. They built a digital puppet. Dario continued. Scanned your face from every angle, mapped your movement patterns, synthesized your voice. Then they placed you in scenes you were never part of. Another video. This one showed Cosimo throwing a glass against a wall. The glass shattered in slow motion, fragments catching the light. Vittoria cowered in the corner, hands raised defensively. except Cosimo had never owned glasses like that, and had never painted his walls that particular shade of grey, had never, in any moment of his life, made Vittoria cower. The prosecution used 4 videos total, Dario said, opening them in sequence. 4 separate incidents spanning 8 months, each one showing escalating violence. The jury saw a pattern, the judge saw premeditation, your lawyer saw an unwinnable case and advised you to take the plea. 5 years, Cosimo said. I took 5 years because fighting would have meant 10. You took 5 years because the evidence was perfect. Dario zoomed in on one of the videos, highlighting the edge of Cosimo's face. Look here. See this pixel bleeding? That's a compression artifact from the rendering process. And here, he pointed to the shadow on the wall. The light source doesn't match the window position. Small things. Things a jury would never notice. But they're there. He pulled up the source code from the original files. Metadata that couldn't be scrubbed completely. Render farm logs, software licenses. Every digital fingerprint that proved the videos weren't recordings of reality, but constructions of it. She didn't just frame you, Dario said. She built the frame from scratch. Cosimo sat back, staring at the screens. 6 years of his life. 5 in prison, 1 trying to survive what came after. All of it built on footage that had never happened, on a version of himself that existed only in pixels and code. Can we prove it? He asked. In court, eventually, with the right forensic experts, the right lawyers, probably 6 months of hearings. Dario closed the laptop. But that's 6 more months of your kids thinking you're dead. So what do we do? Dario pulled out a flash drive, held it up to the light. We don't prove it in court, we prove it in public. He copied the files, the source footage, the invoices, the metadata, everything. Then he created a second copy, and a third. Insurance against insurance. The gala, Cosimo said, understanding. 200 guests, politicians, tech executives, journalists, every screen in that house connected to a smart home system I can access remotely. Dario's smile was thin, sharp. Vittoria wants to live in a world she controls. Let's show her what happens when someone changes the channel. Cosimo looked at the flash drive, a piece of plastic smaller than his thumb. Inside it, the evidence that could destroy Vittoria's entire constructed reality, and could give him back his name, his freedom, his right to exist in his children's lives, but it wouldn't give him back 5 years. There's something else, Dario said. He opened one final file, an email chain between Vittoria and Dr. Kane, the cardiologist who'd signed the death certificates. The messages were clinical, transactional, discussions of dosages, timing, how long the children would need to remain sedated to sell the illusion. One message stood out. Vittoria had written, "Make sure they don't suffer. I need them healthy on the other side." Kane's response, "They won't remember any of it." She planned everything, Cosimo said. She planned for everything except one variable. Dario corrected. You getting out early? You refusing to disappear? You finding someone who could decode her perfect crime? Cosimo stood, walked to the van's window. Dawn was breaking over the cliffs, painting the estate in shades of gold and shadow. Somewhere in that fortress, his children were waking up, starting another day in a life built on lies. 2 more days, he said. 2 more days. Dario agreed. Then we tear down her entire world. And for the first time since leaving prison, Cosimo smiled. The gala began at 8. Cosimo arrived at 7:45, dressed in a rented tuxedo that fit better than his prison-issued release clothes, but worse than the suits he used to wear when he owned half the city. The valet didn't look at his face, just took the keys to the sedan Dario had registered under a false name and drove it toward the overflow parking. Security at the gate was tight, but distracted. too many guests arriving simultaneously, and too many vehicles to search thoroughly. Cosimo's invitation, forged by Dario and inserted into Vittoria's guest management system 3 days ago, scanned without issue. The guard waved him through with barely a glance. The estate looked different at night. The glass walls glowed from within, turning the entire structure into a lantern perched on the edge of the world. String lights wrapped the garden paths. A quartet played something classical near the fountain. Waiters in white jackets moved through the crowd, carrying trays of champagne that probably cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week. Cosimo walked through it all like a ghost passing through a world he no longer belonged to. "I'm in," he said quietly, touching the communications earpiece Dario had given him. "Copy that." Dario's voice crackled in his ear. "I've got eyes on the security feeds. You're clear to the east entrance. Catering staff is using it for service access. Blend with them." Cosimo moved along the perimeter of the party, staying in the spaces between conversations, invisible by virtue of being unremarkable. Just another wealthy guest in a sea of wealth. He snagged a champagne flute from a passing tray, held it without drinking, used it as camouflage. The east entrance was tucked behind a manicured hedge, far enough from the main party to be ignored. 2 waiters stood smoking, their jackets unbuttoned, exhaustion already settling into their shoulders despite the event being less than an hour old. Cosimo waited until they finished, watched them stub out cigarettes and return inside. Then he followed, slipping through the door in their wake. The interior hallway was utilitarian. White walls, linoleum floors, the bones of the house showing through the expensive skin. He could hear the kitchen ahead, the clatter of plates, the sharp commands of a head chef managing controlled chaos. "Stairwell to your right," Dario said. "Takes you to the 2nd floor. From there, the children's wing is accessible via the east corridor." Cosimo found the stairs, climbed them quickly but quietly. His heart hammered against his ribs, but his breathing stayed controlled. 5 years in prison had taught him patience, restraint, how to move through hostile territory without making noise. The 2nd floor was carpeted, insulated from the party below by expensive soundproofing. He could hear music faintly, feel the bass vibrating through the walls, but it was distant, muffled. Up here, the house felt empty. "Security patrol in 90 seconds, Dario warned. "Duck into the room on your left." Cosimo slipped through a doorway, found himself in a home office. Mahogany desk, leather chairs, bookshelves lined with first editions that had probably never been read. He stood in the darkness, watching through the cracked door as a guard walked past, radio clipped to his belt, hand resting casually on the grip of a holstered taser. The guard's footsteps faded. "Clear," Dario said. "Children's wing is 30 feet ahead. Biometric lock on the door. Can you override it?" "Already did. You've got a 60-second window before the system logs the unauthorized access. After that, alarms trigger." Cosimo moved. The hallway stretched ahead like a throat he was being swallowed by. The door to the children's wing was reinforced steel disguised as wood, the kind of security that pretended to be decorative but could withstand a battering ram. The lock's LED glowed green. Dario's work. Cosimo pushed through. The corridor beyond was different, softer. The walls were painted in warm colors, blues and greens and gentle yellows. Nightlights shaped like stars lined the baseboards. Framed drawings hung at child height. The air smelled like lavender and something sweeter. Childhood, preserved and sanitized. 3 doors, 3 bedrooms. "Cosimo?" Dario's voice carried a warning. "The kids are downstairs. They're at the party. Vittoria has them greeting guests." He froze. "What?" "I'm watching the ballroom feeds. All 3 children, dressed up, shaking hands, playing the perfect family." Cosimo's hand found the wall. I steadied himself. He'd come here expecting to find them sleeping. Vulnerable, easy to extract. But Vittoria had weaponized them, turned them into props for her performance. "Where exactly?" he asked. "East side of the ballroom, near the piano." Gia's holding Vittoria's hand. Cosimo moved back towards the stairs, faster now. The plan was fracturing. He'd expected stealth, extraction, gone before anyone noticed. But you couldn't extract children from the center of a crowd without it becoming a spectacle. "New plan," he said. "I'm listening. Can you access the house's projection system?" A pause. Then, "The smart displays in the ballroom?" "All of them." "What are you thinking?" Cosimo reached the top of the stairs, looked down at the glow of the party below. 200 witnesses, 200 people who thought they knew the truth. "I'm thinking it's time to introduce myself," he said. "Cosimo, if you go down there, they need to see me, not as a ghost, as their father." Dario was silent for 3 seconds. Then, "You're sure?" "I'm sure." "Then let's burn it all down." Cosimo descended the stairs like a man walking toward his own execution. Each step brought him closer to the music, the laughter, the crystalline sound of 200 people celebrating a lie. He could see the ballroom through the archway ahead, chandeliers throwing prismatic light across marble floors, women in evening gowns that cost more than cars, men in tuxedos discussing mergers and acquisitions like they were discussing weather. And in the center of it all, near a grand piano where someone was playing something soft and forgettable, stood his children. Luca wore a small suit, navy blue with a crisp white shirt. His hair was combed back, making him look older than 10. He stood with his hands clasped in front of him, the posture of a child who'd been taught how to behave in rooms like this. Matteo fidgeted beside him in an identical suit, his tie already loosened, his attention wandering to the dessert table. And Gia, small and perfect in a white dress with yellow flowers, held Vittoria's hand and smiled at guests with the practiced charm of a politician's daughter. Cosimo stopped at the edge of the ballroom, heart hammering so hard he could feel it in his throat. "I'm ready," he said quietly. "Triggering playback in 3. Dario's voice said in his ear. 2, 1. Every screen in the ballroom flickered, the smart displays mounted on the walls, the tablets waiters used to manage drink orders, even the projection system showing the charity's promotional video, all of them cut to black simultaneously. The music stopped, conversations faltered. Then the screens lit up again, but not with the charity video, with footage of Cosimo. Old footage, from before the arrest, before prison, before everything collapsed. Home videos Dario had recovered from seized hard drives and cloud backups Vittoria thought she'd deleted. Cosimo playing with Luca in a park, teaching him how to throw a baseball. Cosimo reading to Matteo at bedtime, doing different voices for each character. Cosimo holding infant Gia, dancing slowly around a living room while she giggled against his shoulder. The ballroom went silent. Cosimo walked forward. People parted without realizing they were doing it, or creating a path between him and the children. He saw recognition flicker across some faces, guests who'd known him before, who'd attended different parties in different lives. Saw confusion on others. Saw Vittoria's face drain of color. But he only looked at the children. Luca saw him first. His eyes went wide, his mouth opening slightly. Not recognition, not yet. Just confusion at why this stranger was walking toward them while their father's face played on every screen in the room. Matteo turned, following his brother's gaze. He tilted his head, studying Cosimo with the same intensity he'd given everything as a toddler. The kind of focus that meant he was solving a puzzle. Gia just stared, her small hand tightening around Vittoria's fingers. Cosimo stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see their faces clearly. Close enough to see the slight tremor in Luca's jaw, the way Matteo's breathing had quickened, the tears forming in Gia's eyes even though she didn't understand why. Do you know who I am? Cosimo asked. His voice came out rougher than he intended, scraped raw by 5 years of silence and 3 days of planning for this exact moment. Luca's lips moved, but no sound came out. On the screens, the video changed. Cosimo's voice now, reading a bedtime story. And the brave knight promised his children he would always come back, no matter how far he had to travel, no matter how long it took. Matteo's eyes snapped to the screen, then back to Cosimo. His face crumpled with something too complex for a 9-year-old to process. Memory fighting against erasure, truth colliding with constructed reality. He started, then stopped. Gia pulled away from Vittoria, took one tentative step forward. Her elephant, the blue one with embroidered stars, was clutched in her other hand. She'd brought it to the party. "Cosmo!" she whispered, holding up the stuffed animal. Cosimo's knees nearly gave out. "Yes," he said. "Like Cosmo." She took another step. "Mama said you were gone." "I was." He lowered himself to one knee, bringing himself to her eye level. "But I came back." Luca's breathing hitched. His hands were shaking. "You're the man from the videos." "I'm your father." The words hung in the air like smoke. Behind the children, Vittoria moved, reaching for Gia, but Cosimo's voice stopped her. "Don't." Security guards were converging now, responding to the disturbance, but they moved slowly, uncertain. The screens kept playing, evidence mounting with every frame. A life that had existed, a father who had loved, a family that had been real. Matteo broke first. He ran the 10 feet between them and collided with Cosimo's chest hard enough to hurt. His arms wrapped around Cosimo's neck with desperate strength. "Papa!" He sobbed into Cosimo's shoulder. "Papa! They said you were dead!" The word detonated something in Cosimo's chest. He wrapped his arms around his son, held him like he could keep him from ever slipping away again. Gia came next, slower, still uncertain, but drawn by something deeper than memory. She touched Cosimo's face with her small hand, tracing the unfamiliar lines, the new scars, trying to reconcile the man kneeling before her with the ghost in the videos. "Papa?" she asked, voice small and breaking. "Yes, baby, it's me." She crumpled into his other arm. The elephant pressed between them. Only Luca remained standing, 10 feet away, tears streaming down his face, but body rigid with conflict. 5 years of careful conditioning warring against 5 years of earlier memory. He looked at Vittoria, then at Cosimo, then at his siblings clinging to this stranger who felt like home. "I remember you," he finally said, voice cracking. "I remember. They said I didn't, but I remember." Cosimo extended his hand. Luca crossed the distance in 3 steps and collapsed against his father's chest, joining his siblings. All 3 children wrapped in Cosimo's arms, all 3 sobbing, all 3 saying the word Vittoria had spent years erasing. "Papa, Papa, Papa!" Around them, 200 witnesses stood frozen, watching a resurrection. Vittoria's voice cut through the silence like a scalpel. "Security, remove this man from my home." 4 guards converged, hands moving to their belts. The children tensed in Cosimo's arms, but he didn't release them, didn't stand. Just stayed kneeling on the marble floor, his children pressed against him like they could merge back into a single entity if they held tight enough. "Don't touch them," he said quietly. The lead guard hesitated. He was ex-military, probably special forces, trained to assess threats and neutralize them efficiently. But this wasn't a threat he recognized. A man kneeling, 3 children crying, 200 witnesses with phones already recording. "Mr. Pellegrini," the guard said, using the name even though no introductions had been made. "You need to come with us." "No." Cosimo looked up at Vittoria. She stood 15 feet away, her yellow dress blazing under the chandeliers, on her face a mask of controlled fury. "I'm not going anywhere, and neither are they." "You're trespassing," Vittoria said. Her voice was steady, but Cosimo could see the calculation behind her eyes. Damage control, spin management, already composing the story she'd tell once he was removed. "You violated a restraining order. You're in breach of custody agreements. Guards, I want him arrested for kidnapping." "Kidnapping," Cosimo repeated. He looked at the children in his arms. "Is it kidnapping to hold your own children? The ones you were told were dead?" Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Phones tilted, capturing every word. Vittoria's smile was thin, dangerous. "You're delusional. These children have a legal father. You're a convicted felon with a history of violence." "History of violence that never happened," Cosimo interrupted. "Dario, I'd show them." The screens changed again. Not home videos this time. Technical footage. The deep fake analysis Dario had compiled. Side-by-side comparisons of the assault videos used in Cosimo's trial and the original source material they'd been constructed from. Pixel-by-pixel breakdowns showing the rendering artifacts. Metadata proving the files had been created, not recorded. And then, the invoices. Vittoria's shell company. Payments to Parallax Digital. Emails discussing archival reconstruction, with enough detail to make the intent unmistakable. A woman in the front row, a journalist based on the press credentials around her neck, raised her phone higher, zooming in on the screens. "That's fabricated," Vittoria said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "Manipulated evidence. He's trying to—" "There's more," Cosimo said. The screens shifted one final time. Audio now, playing over the speakers throughout the ballroom. A conversation. Vittoria's voice, crystal clear, recorded 3 days ago when Cosimo had visited her penthouse. "Do you know what the hardest part was? Not the legal paperwork, not the bribes, not even faking the poisoning. It was teaching them to stop asking about you." The ballroom went deathly silent. Vittoria's face drained of color. "You recorded me illegally." Luca was the worst. He'd cry at night. "Where's Papa? When is Papa coming home?" For months, Cosimo. Months of that voice breaking my sleep. So I hired specialists, child psychologists who understand memory reconstruction. Every eye in the room turned to Vittoria. The guards had stopped advancing. Even they understood they were watching something larger than a custody dispute unfold. The recording continued. Vittoria's voice, cold and clinical, explaining how she'd erased Cosimo from the children's memories, how she'd faked their deaths, how she'd rebuilt their entire lives on a foundation of lies and medication and psychological manipulation. "You lost, Cosimo. Not in court, not in prison. You lost the moment I decided you were inconvenient." The audio ended. Vittoria stood frozen, her champagne flute trembling in her hand. Around her, guests backed away slowly, creating distance, disassociating themselves from the woman at the center of the revelation. "Dario," Cosimo said quietly. "Send it." "Already done," Dario's voice confirmed in his ear. "Every police precinct in the city, FBI field office, State Attorney General. Plus I CC'd about 40 journalists. This is going to be national news in an hour." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Cosimo stood slowly, carefully, keeping the children close. Luca's hand found his. Matteo pressed against his side. Gia wouldn't release his neck. "You can't do this," Vittoria said. But the words had no weight. She looked around desperately, searching for allies, for anyone who might step forward and validate her version of reality. No one moved. "I gave them a better life. I saved them from you." "You buried them alive," Cosimo said, "and convinced the world to throw dirt on their graves." The first police car pulled into the circular drive, lights painting the glass walls in red and blue. A detective pushed through the crowd, badge already out. She looked at the screens, still displaying evidence. I looked at Vittoria, looked at Cosimo and the 3 children clinging to him. "Someone want to tell me what's happening here?" she asked. "I'm Cosimo Pellegrini," he said. "These are my children, and I'd like to report a kidnapping." Vittoria's champagne flute slipped from her fingers and shattered on the marble floor. The legal proceedings took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of depositions and forensic analysis and expert witnesses explaining to a judge how memory could be weaponized, how death could be faked, how an entire reality could be constructed from sedatives and lies and money that never asked questions. Vittoria was arrested the night of the gala. The charges came in layers: kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, falsifying medical records, bribery of public officials. Dr. Caney was extradited from the Maldives 3 days later. The visual effects studio that created the deep fake videos cooperated immediately, producing every file, every render, every piece of evidence that proved Cosimo's assault conviction had been manufactured. The conviction was vacated on a Tuesday morning in a courtroom that smelled like old wood and stale coffee. The judge read the decision without ceremony, her voice flat and bureaucratic, as if erasing 5 years of a man's life required nothing more than signing paperwork and updating databases. Cosimo stood when it was finished, a free man for the second time in 6 years. But freedom felt different now, heavier, more complicated, because the children were healing, but healing wasn't linear. Luca had nightmares, woke up screaming that Cosimo was gone again, that the reunion had been another constructed memory, another lie. It took 3 weeks before he stopped checking Cosimo's bedroom every morning to make sure he was still real. Matteo clung, followed Cosimo from room to room, needed constant reassurance, constant physical contact. The therapist said it was normal, said trust needed to be rebuilt brick by brick, said patience was the only tool that mattered. Gia asked questions, endless questions. Why did Mama lie? Where did Papa go? Why couldn't she remember? Each question a small wound that needed careful dressing. Cosimo answered them all, slowly, gently, letting the truth settle in doses small enough not to overwhelm. And Serafina watched it all with those 2 old eyes, the girl who'd lived in shadows, and pointed at truth when everyone else was content with fiction. Cosimo made it official 4 weeks after the gala. Our guardianship papers filed and approved. She had her own room now, her own clothes that didn't smell like industrial runoff, her own seat at a table where she belonged. The cemetery visit was Luca's idea. "We should take it down," he said one morning at breakfast. "The stone, it's a lie. We shouldn't leave lies standing." So on a Saturday in late spring, the 6 of them drove to the cemetery together. Cosimo and Dario in the front seat. Luca, Matteo, Gia, and Serafina in the back, arguing about whether they should stop for ice cream after. The headstone looked smaller than Cosimo remembered, less imposing. Just a piece of polished granite with 3 names and 3 faces that had never belonged there. The cemetery manager, the same red-faced man who'd tried to chase Serafina away 2 months ago, met them at the gate with paperwork. And he didn't apologize, but he didn't make eye contact either. Just handed over the removal authorization and walked away quickly. Dario had arranged for a stone removal crew, but Cosimo waved them off when they arrived. This was something that needed to be done by hand, by family. He knelt in front of the stone, the same position he'd been in when Serafina first spoke to him. But everything was different now. The rain had stopped. The roses were gone. And behind him, 3 children, who were supposed to be dead, stood very much alive. "Can I help?" Gia asked. Cosimo looked back at her. She was holding Serafina's hand, both of them small and fierce and unbreakable in ways that had nothing to do with size. "We all help," he said. It took an hour to dig out the foundation. Luca worked with systematic precision, measuring his efforts, and calculating angles. Matteo attacked the earth with chaotic energy, dirt flying, laughter punctuating the work. Gia and Serafina gathered the loosened soil in buckets, carried it away, created space for the stone to fall. Dario provided the crowbar, showed Cosimo where to wedge it. Together they pried the stone free from its concrete base. It resisted, then gave way suddenly, toppling backward onto the grass with a sound like thunder. The children cheered. Cosimo stood, breathing hard, looking at the empty plot, the hole in the ground where a lie had lived. Soon grass would grow over it. Soon no one would know anything had ever been there at all. "What do we do now?" Matteo asked. Cosimo looked at his children. At Serafina, who'd risked everything to tell a stranger the truth. At Dario, who'd turned ghosts into evidence. At the future that stretched ahead of them, uncertain but real. "Now we go home," he said. Gia tugged his hand. "Is home the apartment? Home is wherever we are together." She considered this, nodded solemnly, then, "Can home have ice cream?" Luca rolled his eyes. Matteo laughed. Serafina smiled, rare and genuine and worth every second of the last 2 months. Cosimo scooped Gia up, settled her on his hip. She wrapped her arms around his neck, the blue elephant crushed between them. They walked away from the grave that had never held bodies, away from the stone that had never held truth, toward a future that would need to be built carefully, brick by brick, memory by memory. But they walked together, and that was the only kingdom that mattered.